Come to the second sermon in the series to my Christian brethren in the United States of America. Of course, these messages are also relevant to thinking and spiritually sensitive people everywhere in the world. But because of the present context in which America appears to understand the idea of dominating the world in a particular sense, with very unfortunate consequences for peoples in different parts of our beautiful globe, I thought I would address these biblical thoughts, pure and simple, to my Christian brothers and sisters in the United States of America. The focal point of today's reflection together is a verse from the Old Testament, the very first book, the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. I have before me the New International Version. Let me read that out to you. God blessed Adam and Eve and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it." Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish, in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Unfortunately, this verse has been frightfully misunderstood. That misunderstanding is understandable in a cultural context, but it is a misunderstanding nonetheless. And what is more, it's a misunderstanding fraught with serious consequences for humanity at large, but also for the whole of the United States of America. What happens to America affects the rest of the world. So that's another reason why I'm entitled to share these thoughts as a matter of warning. Very affectionate, gentle, at the same time firm warning to especially the Christians in the United States of America. Now, how do we understand the idea of subduing the earth or dominating the earth? So the commandment or the responsibility given to Adam and Eve is be fruitful and increase in number, or as the King James Version says, be fruitful and multiply. The consequence of multiplying will be that you increase in number and you fill the earth. So fill the earth and subdue it. So the word subdue, how do we understand it? That's the whole question. It can be understood in a worldly way, in the lexical sense. Then you arrive at a certain idea of the spiritual responsibility cast on you. You can also understand the word subdue in a spiritual sense, in a non-lexical sense. And then you arrive at an entirely different conclusion. And that's the reality that I want to draw your attention to in a very brief manner in this video. So rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. So the very special responsibility entrusted to human beings is to exercise, if I may put it this way, exercise responsible and caring stewardship over the whole earth. In other words, a child of God has a sense of responsibility that embraces the whole world. And therefore, right away, this idea, America first, and the rest of the world can go to dogs, or dogs may come to the rest of the world, is not a biblical idea at all. Even if it is trumpeted by people who claim to be biblically committed, it's fundamentally anti-biblical, not only unbiblical, it's anti-biblical. It meditates against the very spirit, the very ethos, the character of the Bible. This is the first thing I want to say. Now, let's spend a little time understanding the idea of spiritual domination. What does it mean to subdue, or its consequence, dominate? What's that idea? How are we to understand it? Because much depends on the understanding of this word. Now, in a physical, worldly, empirical, cultural sense, domination is what it is understood today. The powerful dominate the weak. The aggressive dominate the defenseless, the powerless. And in any given society, the elite dominate the rest of the society. Now, in this idea of domination, or from this idea of domination, so two important things are missing. One is, when you dominate in this manner, you have a very, very non-functional idea of your duties and responsibilities concerning what you dominate. Because it's a function of brute force, it excludes the idea or excludes the need to develop a humanly relevant and adequate sense of the responsibilities and duties arising from this relationship of domination or being dominated. So this is the first thing that is missing from it. The second thing that is missing from the worldly idea of domination is understanding, the duty to think and arrive at clearer and deeper and truthful understanding of what is involved in the state of domination. The moment you dominate somebody, the moment you dominate something, the moment you dominate a people group, a country, your brain stops functioning regarding that people because they are simply not important for you. They're not a threat. You don't have to stay intellectually engaged with that people. So domination also entails a state of intellectual disengagement. And therefore, the history of the human species from the very beginning till now very clearly illustrates that the worldly understanding of domination is inimical to the intellectual development of especially the dominating people. The dominated or those who are subdued will continue to think. In fact, they'll think more poignantly than ever before. But the people who have come to dominate will become complacent. They will lose the capacity to think truthfully, think profoundly, think relevantly, which is a great price to pay when you misunderstand the idea of domination, the biblical idea of domination purely in a worldly sense. I'm afraid the American national consciousness is today riddled with this very serious misunderstanding, which does not augur well at all for the country, the great country of America, envisaged by the Pilgrim Fathers as a city set on a hill that it may shine to the whole world. And of course, it does not augur well for the rest of the global community. So that's the seriousness of the theme that we are handling today. And I crave your indulgence in developing this very single thought. It's not difficult, but because it is something that runs counter to the dominant idea of dominance, it may seem a little difficult or demanding. So there are, in the interest of clarity, let's put it this way, there are two completely different, two utterly contrary paradigms of understanding domination. One is domination by brute force. The military power is the only thing that matters. Technology plays a decisive role. Therefore, the country or the people that have the most deadly, technologically cutting-edge weapons in sufficient quantities or quantities that exceed what's available to the adversary will come to dominate. Through, of course, bloodshed. How long the bloodshed lasts depends on the strength and resources of the enemy. So this is the worldly idea of domination. And in fact, the Western project of colonialism was informed by this idea of domination. And in order to mitigate its boorish flavor, its barbaric undertones, a doctrine was evolved, and that was the doctrine of the white man's burden, which prescribed that it was a duty of the white man to go all over the world dominating the non-whites, because the non-whites were assumed to be a people far below the level of reason. And therefore, the white man had a historical duty to civilize the rest of the world and to bring them to the threshold of reason. So, from this idea of domination, in this idea of domination also, the shaping assumption is what I have described so far. It is physical, it's brutal, and as Napoleon the Great once said, God is always on the side of the larger battalion. God is always on the side of the larger battalion. So much for Napoleon's understanding of God's nature, God's priorities, God's partialities. Unfortunately, this is how a vast majority of the people understand it, and therefore, you see in the military history of our species that whenever one nation conquered another, one people conquered another, the victorious group, the victorious army, the victorious nation trampled underfoot the images or idols of gods entertained by the vanquished. In fact, no military in the past was deemed complete until the gods of the vanquished were trampled underfoot. Now, all this belongs to the same paradigm, namely, domination is a matter of brute physical force, and whatever the resultant state entitles the victorious agency or victorious country or force to do. In fact, the victor assumes that it has the right over the wealth and freedom of the vanquished people, and various other consequences follow, since this is not a lesson in history. We will not go too much into details, but I thought this much was necessary to give us an idea of what domination is assumed to mean in a worldly sense. But there is a completely different idea or understanding of domination. And that domination means understanding. Thought, not technology. Sensitive oneness with, rather than brutal, belligerent attack from a distance or from near proximity, is the insignia, is a hallmark of this model of domination. You dominate not with brute physical force, you dominate with the quality of your thinking, your understanding. And thinking and understanding is always geared to the truth. And truth is the other side of the coin of life. This side of that coin is justice. And therefore, from this spiritual idea of domination, the heart of which is the duty to think and understand in truth and in spirit, which immediately breeds the idea or highlights the idea of justice, or the duty to deal responsibly, sensitively, justly, wisely, fairly with everyone, everything that you relate to. This is a completely different idea of subduing or dominating anything. It is this idea, which is actually biblical, it's this idea that is evaporated from Christendom. Unfortunately, America, the thinking of the Christian community in America is woefully, heartbreakingly poorer for this loss. So when in this passage, God exhorts Adam and Eve to exercise dominion over the fish of the sea, the animals and the trees and the plants, the entire created order. Surely no man dominates the wealth of the sea. You cannot dominate the birds of the air. You cannot dominate the animals, and you don't dominate the animals in the forests of the world. You may domesticate some animals out of them, but even them you don't dominate, in the sense that a powerful army seeks to dominate a powerless group of people, as is now evident in different parts of the world. So the most fundamental biblical idea is that to dominate anything in a justifiable, acceptable, spiritually valid way is to understand it, is to think over it, to understand what it is in the most sensitive, detailed manner, so that you can relate to it within the discipline of reciprocity. Now, domination in the worldly sense completely excludes the discipline of reciprocity or mutuality, whereas all spiritual relationships are necessarily characterized by the discipline of mutuality or reciprocity. For example, Jesus said, treat others that you would like to be treated by them. Now, that is a spiritual relationship, whereas the worldly relationship is treat others according to your power and their powerlessness. Do what you want with them if they cannot hit back. Or as Dickens puts it in one of his novels, do them before they do you. That's a worldly idea of relationship. Now, if domination is understood in the worldly or empirical or physical sense of the word, what happens? And the Bible actually gives an early illustration of this, and that's the story of Cain and Abel. Cain was actually trying to dominate, subdue his brother. Now, I don't know if anyone has ever explained this to you. Why does Cain kill his brother Abel? Ironically, Cain can jolly well turn back and tell you, if you ask him, Cain, why did you kill your brother? He was such a nice fellow, a good chap. Why do you kill him? He could turn back and tell you as well that, God asked me to subdue him. God asked me to dominate. And I was trying to dominate. Unfortunately, in the process, he died. Poor chap. What can I do? That is why Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? Now, Cain is making a very interesting, historically profound point. The point is, you cannot be your brother's keeper and also dominate your brother. The consequence of domination is death, murder, etc. Now, you could say that, yes, the relationship between Cain and Abel cannot be extrapolated to humanity at large. My question is, why not? If you as a Christian believe that God created the whole world and God created, therefore, humanity as a whole, then who is not a brother, who is not a sister? Are not Christians and Jews duty-bound scripturally to believe that all are brothers and sisters? Is that not the vision that inspires the public ministry, the mission of Jesus Christ? Are we not supposed to be the followers of Jesus Christ, to abide in Him and He in us? If you are a Christian, you can make no excuse about this. You have to consider the whole world, the whole of humanity as your family. Everyone is your brother, everyone your sister. That's how I understand my faith. That's the reason why I find it difficult to endorse any and every divisive agenda invented and unveiled by the bishops. Unfortunately, unthinking Christians slavishly ape their leaders and think that whatever comes from the centers of vested interest, ecclesiastical vested interest, is the gospel truth. It's a terrible mistake. Every Christian is duty bound to think and understand the world from the biblical spiritual perspective and form his or her opinion or standpoint regarding all the issues that come up from time to time. A Christian's ultimate loyalty is to Jesus Christ, not to a nation, not to a popular political character, not to an ideology, not to a culture, not even to a religion. It is to Lord Jesus Christ and his Father in heaven. So, when Cain killed Abel, he was providing an eternal warning as to what happens when the idea of subduing and dominating is understood in a physical, worldly, brutal sense. Let's make very clear. It is this misunderstanding that has perverted the American perception of its responsibilities throughout the world. It's still playing out, and therefore Christians in America cannot afford to pretend that it doesn't concern them. So, in the light of what I've said so far, we can actually arrive at this kind of an equation. Master equals think, that is spiritual. Master equals kill, that is secular, empirical, historico-cultural. It's as simple as that. So let's fix that very clearly in our mind. Now, there is a problem that Christians in America must be particularly aware of this time. If you embrace the worldly idea of domination as a function of brutal and barbaric force, what will happen? What will be its consequence for you? This will kill your power of thought. If you are familiar with world history, you will see that profound thinking originated from the dominated people and not from the dominating people. After all, where did Christianity originate? It originated among a people dominated brutally by the Roman Empire. You do not have deep insights of the spiritual kind emerging from the power centers of the world. Military strategies and programs of cruelty may emerge one after the other, but you don't have spiritual insights, life-enriching, man-liberating spiritual insights emerging from centers of physical might. So, what is happening to the Christian community in America and America as a nation, unfortunately understood as a Christian nation throughout the world, is that this brutal idea of physical domination is killing the power of thought among Americans. When I say power of thought, I mean the ability to think spiritually, the power of spiritual thinking. It is for this reason that America is today characterized by a near complete evaporation or absence of spiritual thinking regarding the emerging issues, realities, challenges, and opportunities of our times. And therefore, the theme that I'm sharing with you and the questions that I'm raising through this, the dangers that I'm forewarning, all have a direct bearing, particularly on the American predicament. So please remember this: physical domination will kill the power of thought of the dominating force, and in this case, America. So the biblical injunction against putting your trust on horses and chariots in the Psalms, the book of Psalms, right? Do not put your trust in horses and chariots. Why not? Because the moment you put your trust in horses and chariots, you begin to lose your most distinctive capacity, the capacity to think sensitively, think responsibility, think justly, wisely, think as a human being, and then react in partnership with God or as God's deputy placed upon this earth. That's the most exalted vocation of a human being. If you are a human being, you are God's deputy, anointed and placed upon this earth. And the scope of your relationship with the world is to react to anything and everything that comes up on behalf of God and not on behalf of an individual, a culture, or a nation, or what have you. So, if you put your trust in horses and chariots, your heart will shrink, your mind, your thinking capacity will get progressively paralyzed, and you will become a parrot, mindlessly or uncomprehendingly repeating whatever the propaganda dishes out to you. And therefore, the ability to think in fidelity to your calling to be the disciple of Jesus Christ, who is the truth, the way of life, that calling will be completely forgotten. In fact, you would mistake your Christian vocation as a vocation to sing hallelujah to the brutal authorities of the world who might seem to be protecting your material interests, but who are actually undermining your spiritual credibility and your wholeness and integrity as a people of faith. So, do not put your trust in horses and chariots. Of course, we have come a long way from horses and chariots here. Horses and chariots are metaphors for military might. In those days, the outcome of wars depended on horses and chariots. Today, it's entirely different. It's high-tech, destructive military weaponry. Put your trust in God, and God continuously calls you to attain mastery in thought over the affairs of the world. He who thinks controls the world. Actually, that's how it is even in the secular world. But even more in the spiritual world. So it is this kind of mastery over the world that the people of God are exalted and encouraged, in fact, required to acquire and exercise. And it is when this duty to understand whatever comes up, whatever happens, especially the new that emerges from time to time, because history is a continuous forward flow of possibilities, is when this capacity is lost, that something new comes up and it is frightfully misunderstood. And what is this misunderstood will be responded to only in brute force, because the alternative to understanding is killing it. And I've said that already. To stop thinking is to start killing. I repeat, to stop thinking is to start killing. And what happens when the religious authorities stop thinking is clearly illustrated in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. First, I said that what happens when the idea of domination is understood in a worldly and brutal sense is illustrated through the story of Cain killing his brother Abel. And what happens when, in the religious domain, what emerges is understood from the perspective of domination in a worldly sense, is brutally and unforgettably demonstrated through the passion, the suffering, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, which is a picture of the mortals, as Soren Kierkegaard said, the mortals killing the immortal. He said the crucifixion is actually a funny spectacle because it's the mortals trying to kill the immortal. He says there's nothing funnier than that. But the real serious issue at the heart of it, which Kierkegaard doesn't talk about, is that this results from understanding domination in a worldly sense as exercised with the domain of religion, which turns necessarily against God. The understanding of domination, understood in a secular, empirical sense, in the non-religious context, turns brother against brother. That's the story of Cain and Abel. The misunderstanding of domination in the religious domain turns religion against God. So it is serious. Both are very serious issues. And you find both at work in the American scenario today. That's the reason why I thought I would choose this as the point of reflection. So, either Christians dominate the world with the Holy Spirit or with the sword. Whether that option of the sword is available to us or not, or should be available to us or not, is a question that Jesus answered in the most emphatic manner possible. You find that in the 26th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, when Peter draws out his sword to defend his master, when the soldiers lay their hands upon him to arrest him. What does Jesus say? Put down the sword. He who takes the sword shall fall by it. So I close this special sermon for my brothers and sisters in the United States of America, quoting the inimitable, unforgettable words of Jesus. Put down the sword. Stop killing. Start thinking. Stop killing. Start thinking. Thank you.